Hello, you're very welcome back to the studio. Today I'm going to show you some very simple methods of painting trees. I'm going to paint an oak tree, I'm going to paint some pine trees and some silver birches. The colours that I'm going to use are French ultramarine, burnt sienna and aureolin, which is my favourite yellow. The paper that I'm using today is 640 gram Arches paper, cold pressed finish. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do, I'd be grateful if you give me a like. So now I have 3 bits of paint mixed up here now, just using the 3 of these colours here. And I have in here I have the aureolin and the French ultramarine made up to give this nice bright colour. So I've only a tiny bit of the blue in it, only a tiny bit. The next bit now, I have more blue in that one. And this one here, the dark green, I have used a lot of blue, and I've also used a little bit of burnt sienna in it as well. Burnt sienna being this nice tan. So that's the burnt sienna that I've put a little bit of that in to darken it. And there's your French ultramarine blue that I've used. And so that's aureolin, French ultramarine and burnt sienna. So that's all I'm using now for the trees. So this is going to be a tree full of foliage and possibly an oak tree. So I'm using this brush. It's a long round brush, and it has a lovely point, so it works both as a large brush and as a pointy one as well to give you fine detail. Right, so I'm just going to thinking of kind of maybe like three areas around here. Don't want to make it too regular or too symmetric. And I'm leaving spaces between a lot of them that you'll see the branches coming through. Then I'll go on to the darker one and layer it up. You can use a little point of the brush at this stage as well too if you want to, just to darken underneath. Remember, the lightest part of the trees are going to be around the edges and the top where the light is catching it. You can make it a little bit stronger if you want it. It's almost like little patches of wet into wet there, because the little patches are wet. The page is dry, but the little patches that I've put down are wet. A little bit of the light up there to scatter it a little bit more. Make it a little bit uneven where you'd see the leaves out at the edges. Now the very dark one now. If there's too much paint on the brush, then you can take it off. Always have some paper, kitchen toweling or something around where you can use that. See how so you don't want anything all the one colour. It's kind of boring apart from anything else, but it's also a bit unrealistic too, unless it was very dull outside, and in which case you probably wouldn't see a lot of shades of green. But if the sun is shining and so now I'm going to envisage the trunk of the tree being down around here. So I'm going to get some dark, fairly heavy paint, but remember I've got a tiny point on this. I'm going to wipe off some of it, and I'm going to envisage the trunk of the tree down here, but I won't do it yet. But all the little branches, I'm going to start with the little branches, and I'm going to bring them all down to, it's like bringing them all down to the mothership kind of, because eventually they'll all, one way or the other, converge in this direction. Don't make them too brown, because you don't really see colour at a distance like that. It could be little bits all right, but really delicately. When I'm doing very delicate work like that, I hold the brush very tightly, and it's almost like as if you're trying to hold it back. So that'll do. So that's just an idea of how you can quickly do the tree. And again, just repeating that, you know, you put on the clumps of colour first, and then you can make the tree out of it then. But always have a centre kind of imagined, so that, you know, in some way you know that it's going to all like come back. Like I've one, say, a section there, a section here, and a section around here. So that's it. So that's the oak tree. So I still have a lot of the paint mixed up there. Again, the aureolin, the French ultramarine, and the burnt sienna in mixes there. And I'll just do a little bit about of pine trees, the way I would do a pine tree. I would just start up here, and then you can do it with the side of your brush. You can scrape with the side of your brush if you like, or you can do it with the little points of the brush, whichever. You can leave little spaces between those little clumps so that you can put in a little idea of the bark as well. For example, just little. And there's one. Could do one maybe a little bit bluer, put more blue in the green in more further back, so it might be not quite as bright. You're just really making marks on paper, and each one getting wider as you come down to the end. And think tree when you're doing it. Just think of a pine tree as you're doing it. But there's nothing as good as actually being out looking at them. And I don't think you have to be out while you're painting them. It's nice to do that, but I don't think you have to. Just when you're out, just sit looking at them. You don't have to take notes, you don't have to do anything. Just enjoy sitting looking at them. And then, you know, it's amazing how it's like as if when you look at something for a long time, when you're painting it, then your brain kind of does a self-correcting thing on it. You kind of, without knowing it in words, you may not be able to write an essay on it, but you just know. You know what's not right, and so you correct it as you go. Then I could now just do a little bit of fooling around here with a little idea of a hill in the background. Put a little bit of burnt sienna there as well. And you could, just when I'm at it now, if you wanted to paint a sheep, remember in pure watercolour, there is no white, and so you'd be using the white of the page for the sheep. So I'll be painting around it, a negative painting. Now that doesn't look much like a sheep now, but with a bit of luck, it will. Might be a little bit big. And while that's getting a little bit drier over there, I'm just going to put a few impressions of a pine wood in the background, which would be very blue. And because that's not quite dry, you can use stronger colour because it's and some, of course I've allowed myself to get distracted completely from doing the, just an idea of how I do a pine tree. Now I'm off doing forests and sheep. Little very faint lines to show fields maybe between there. Oops, just meant that to be water. I should wait for it to dry before I do the sheep. Put some grasses and things. When you have a wet enough part and it's not soaking wet, and you put in a dark thing like this, with this end of the brush you can scout up bits of grasses as well too. Look. So I'm going to put a little bit of shadow. I'm going to build up the sheep now. Doesn't have to be completely white either. Anything with volume has the light hitting it somewhere and not hitting it in so much in the other place, in another place. Oops, that's supposed to be green. So I'm using thick black, making black from the blue and the tan. Again, cleaning off excess paint of the brush. And it's still too wet. Just let it dry for a little while. Can fast forward. Okay, and it's dry now. Okay, so I'm just putting little legs. Little head. You really need to have nice shadow underneath. Darken a little bit more at the base of the pine trees. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do now. So that's the pine trees using the 3 shades of green made from the Aureolin and the French Ultramarine and the Burnt Sienna. And the sheep is kind of not there at all. It's just a bit of white paper with a few bits of shading around him. It's a nice exercise to paint white things like that, actually. I like doing it, it's good fun. Okay, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you do, please give me a like. Thanks. So now I'm going on to the birch tree. Normally I have this container for washing the brush in, and this one I keep with clear water, but in actual fact it's got a little bit dirty, and that's all the better for now, because I'm going to paint first of all I'm going to paint the birch tree in just pure water. So I'm trying to keep a good eye on it there now. I can see the shine of the wet paper. I don't want it completely straight, because birch trees are inclined to be fairly straight, but not exactly straight. So remember, when you bend in with one side, you bend in with the other as well. So now I've got some blue, fairly strong blue, and I'm going to put a blue shadow down one side, because I've decided that the light is going to come from this area, which means that this side is going to be in shadow. Now that looks like a very strong blue, but it's actually not going to be so strong when it's finished. It's just that little bit thicker. So I want to wait till that dries, but while I'm doing that, I'll go and do another little birch tree over here. Same idea, paint it in water first. Be a little bit thinner because it's in behind it. Could be a little bit thinner anyway. Now remember, the blue isn't the full width of the tree, it's only the shadowed part. And while that's drying, we'll just do a third one here, kind of a midway one. Right, so the one in the middle is drying. So with the tip of the brush into strong paint, I'm going to get some dark going on there with the burnt sienna and the French ultramarine, which, as I was saying before, it can, that takes you from all through the dark browns. It starts the burnt sienna is tan, and then the more French ultramarine you add into it, the darker brown it gets, right down to what looks like black. So I'm going to just put those little, those little cuts that are in the birch tree. They look so nice, really. Those are actually, I think they're called lenticles. The birch tree uses them for for the transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and the tree. I think they're called lenticles. Remember, don't just come in from the blue side. Come in from this side as well. They don't just exist on one side. And they can be, some of them are more brown. It might be kind of brown bits with bits of dark beside them. These little things that come out from them as well. You can also put little bits of colour on them too, just to make it a little less exact. Could have little things growing on them or something. Now this one should be dry enough now. And do remember to come in from both sides. Both sides now. To some extent it depends on the shape of the thing you're painting, but generally speaking, when you're doing around something lines that are coming around a curved object, when they're lower down, they're inclined to go like this, below eye level, this kind of shape. But when they go up above eye level, they're more that direction. And do remember that this is not a flat surface. It's the tree is round, and so you always have to accommodate that, to think of it. If you just go straight across, it's not going to look good. And now this one. It's not quite dry, but it doesn't matter. When you're not using wet, very wet paint, when you're not using a wet wash and you're using this paint quite strongly, it doesn't disappear through the damp paint so much. Now we're getting through these pretty fast. Again, just a reminder, don't just do the blue, come right in from the full side. I am doing these a bit fast. A bit of green. The beauty of this brush is just so nice. It's just that you can use it for such fine little lines as well as larger areas. Okay. When I'm doing very fine lines, I hold the brush very tightly and almost like as if the brush wants to get at the page, and you're holding it tight and pulling it back a little bit as you're painting. Now I hope that I just don't do too much with this, because it's not the idea of it. But the idea is to just do the birch trees. I hope I don't keep going on. Now remember where the light is coming from, the light's coming this direction, so for the shadows, I'll go over this way. So with watercolour, you can get just such nice little effects so easily, so quickly, when you just get a little bit confident with using the paint. So I'm not going to do anything else with that. The job is done. So that's the 3 birch trees. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I'd be really grateful if you give me a like. Thanks very much.